Good morning. I'm Joe Fryer. Right now on Morning News Now, staying on course. COVID-19 cases and deaths are dramatically falling in the U.S., but the virus is surging abroad. The U.S. is set to restrict travel from India as that country buckles under a devastating surge. Capsized, a daring rescue operation in frigid waters. Multiple people are dead and dozens are injured. Why officials suspect human smuggling after a boat smashed to pieces off California's coast. Bite out of Apple, the tech giant in court today defending how it regulates its app store. Why the maker of Fortnite is accusing Apple of cornering the market and what it might mean for you. And home printers. These aren't just your run-of-the-mill inkjets you have in your home office. We'll take a look at how 3D printing is revolutionizing home building. Good to have you with us on this Monday. Savannah is on assignment today. We begin this morning with a tale of two countries in the fight against the coronavirus. First, progress in the U.S., where over the past week, the average number of new cases has dropped below 50,000 a day. Hospitalizations and deaths are also down. Many experts, including former FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb, are crediting the vaccine rollout.
Has been a monumental achievement rolling out this vaccine, getting that many Americans vaccinated, and it's going to continue. We'll continue to chip away at it.
But a dire situation is growing worse in India. The number of daily cases there climbed to 400,000 on Saturday. That's a new global record. Tomorrow, the U.S. will begin restricting travel from India because of the surge. Our team of correspondents and experts is standing by to bring us all the latest developments. Let's start with NBC News medical reporter Erica Edwards. So, Erica, as we heard moments ago, Scott Gottlieb called the vaccine rollout a monumental achievement. Let's explain why that is. What kind of progress has the U.S. made on the vaccine front, and how close are we getting to herd immunity?
Hi, Joe. Good morning. Well, as of this morning, nearly a third of the U.S. population is fully vaccinated. 44% has had at least one dose. That's still a long way off from achieving any kind of herd immunity. Many experts say that as fast as the rollout of vaccines is going, it's still too slow to keep up with the variants. Now, White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain addressed the need for continued vaccinations over the weekend.
This program is still moving with amazing pace. 1 in 10 Americans got a shot in the last 10 days. 1 in 10 Americans will get a shot in the next 10 days. We're still vaccinating millions of people a day. We've got a lot of work left to do.
Now, we are closer to herd immunity among the most vulnerable age group. Nearly 70% of people over the age of 65 is now considered fully vaccinated. Joe?
Now, Erica, as vaccinations continue and cases decline, big cities are pushing to reopen to 100%. For New York, for example, July 1st is now the goal. What are their plans? How do they hope to do that?
Yeah, about half of New Yorkers have had at least one dose of the vaccine. Those shots are readily available at many of the walk-in clinics. And as of today, more than 80,000 municipal workers are scheduled to go back into their offices in New York City. That's more than a year since they were shut down last March. Now, while not everyone will rush in all at once, they will have certain mitigation measures in place: social distancing, physical distancing, staggered reentry. Senator Chuck Schumer over the weekend was positive, was optimistic about how far New York has come.
COVID-19, we know, took direct aim at New York City. It cost us lives. It cost us jobs. It cost us money. But we're here today more than a year later, and we can see light at the end of the tunnel, including the subway tunnel.
New Jersey, too, is slowly announcing plans to reopen at about 50% capacity. Joe?
Erica, another sign of that light at the end of the tunnel. Americans starting to attend big events in person. The Kentucky Derby pictures this weekend were almost like old times. Got to see all those hats. What are they doing at these kinds of events to try and make sure people stay safe?
There was some physical distancing at the Kentucky Derby. Masks were required, although I don't know how long you could keep a mask on while sipping on mint juleps. In California, there was a concert called Vax Live. It was intended to promote awareness of the COVID-19 vaccine and raise some money to get vaccines to poorer countries. It was intended to, humanitarian Hugh Evans, one of the organizers, tweeted some video, all the health first responders who were there, mostly masked. J-Lo performed, Eddie Vedder performed, and Foo Fighters. I was trying to think of that last one. Joe?
Sounds like a good selection of musicians there, and it is hard to drink a mint julep with that mask on. But Erica, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Now to India, which is fast approaching a devastating milestone, 20 million coronavirus cases. The country launched a campaign to get all adults vaccinated over the weekend. But as of today, the country is still struggling to secure enough oxygen for its overwhelmed hospitals. The situation is so dire, a U.S. travel ban is set to begin tomorrow. NBC's Keir Simmons has more.
Hey there, Joe. From tomorrow, any travel between India and the United States will be banned, except for in some cases, including United States citizens, as the numbers of coronavirus cases there continue to surge. For the 12th consecutive day, the numbers of infections increasing by 300,000. India has now had 20 million infections since the beginning of the pandemic, and many deaths. Many hospitals reporting a lack of beds, a lack of oxygen, families having to go out to the streets of India just to get oxygen for their loved ones. Really desperate scenes across that country of more than a billion people. It is a crisis, the worst crisis now in COVID in anywhere around the world. Joe?
Only one U.S.-based airline has direct flights to India. United Airlines sends four flights a day to Delhi and Mumbai, but those flights will face restrictions starting tomorrow for an indefinite amount of time when the U.S. travel ban takes effect. NBC News correspondent Ron Allen is at Newark Airport. So, Ron, flights can take off there today, but that all changes tomorrow. What can you tell us about the travel restrictions that will be taking place between the U.S. and India?
Well, Joe, for context, remember, you can't fly to the United States these days from overseas without a negative COVID test from just about every country in the world. And there are already travel restrictions from places like China, Brazil, as well as many European countries to come into the United States. So India is joining a list. The whole idea of this is to try and stop the spread of the B.1.1.7 variant that's in India. And a lot of people are critical of the travel ban because they say the variant is already in the United States. So imposing a travel ban is going to create a lot of uncertainty for families. It's going to disrupt business. And some epidemiologists say that it really won't stop the variant from spreading to this country. But basically, the bottom line is, yes, there are a number of flights on Air India, a number of flights on United that come to the United States every day from India. And basically, you won't be able to get on a flight, I would suspect, in India unless you are a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident, or you pass the other requirements that are necessary to come into this country, a negative COVID test, vaccinations, and so forth. Remember, this is a little bit different than when President Trump then imposed travel restrictions on China at the beginning of the pandemic. Now we're at a different phase. There's a lot of testing available. There's vaccination. So there's a lot of other ways to restrict people coming into this country from other places like India. Joe?
Now, Ron, travelers may not be going back and forth, but the Biden administration is looking to send vaccines to India. But the Indian government is calling for the U.S. to waive vaccine patent protections. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, patents, as you can imagine, are a very, very delicate subject. As I understand it, the Biden administration is going to send vaccine raw materials to India. There's also talk of sending AstraZeneca vaccine to India, which is not approved for use in the United States. This is a dilemma around the world, a controversy around the world, where rich nations are being accused of hoarding the vaccine and keeping it out of poor countries. Very, very few people in India and other countries in the third world. India is a developing country, but other countries in the third world, very small percentage of their populations are getting the vaccination. So this is a humanitarian issue. It's a moral question. But again, at this point, the Biden administration seems determined to send raw materials, the AstraZeneca vaccine, testing, rapid testing kits, PPE, and other sorts of resources and support, oxygen tanks and so forth, to help the Indian people, but stopping short of patent. That's a very, very complicated issue because it involves not just the government, but of course it involves private enterprise, companies, how they will handle these patents. But obviously it's a big question because this is a huge, huge humanitarian disaster that's unfolding in that country, in India, and many people are calling on the rich nations like the United States to do as much as possible, more than they're doing now, to help. Joe?
Reminder that this is a global fight. Ron Allen at Newark Airport. Ron, thank you so much. I want to bring in NBC News medical contributor, Dr. Kavita Patel. Doctor, good to have you with us. Let's start right there with this travel ban, these restrictions taking effect tomorrow. The situation in India has gone from bad to worse. Do you think this should have happened earlier in order to protect the U.S.?
Yeah, Joe, great question. And I think travel bans in general, as you heard here talk about, can be problematic and often do not actually improve the situation. If we were going to do it, it certainly would have been when we saw this uptick, not when we're coming through the throes of like the complete disaster. And just to put it in context, even 500,000 cases in India, one, it's an undercount, Joe. Two, it's a country of 1.4 billion people. So this is likely to get much worse before it gets better.
Dr. Fauci makes a point of speaking directly to the media that needs, for the community that needs to get the message. And he had a message for the Indian government and said this to the Indian Express: literally lock down so that you wind up having less spread. Now, India's health system could reach a breaking point. What do they need and what should we be doing more of?
Yeah, great points all around. Even if we sent all our excess vaccine, Joe, it's not enough. And I'll just be candid. This is a situation that you cannot vaccinate your way out of. You really do have to go back to basic public health measures, which is why you heard Dr. Fauci locking down. In addition, Joe, people do need to have better education. There's so much misinformation about when to wear masks, how to safely isolate, what to do if you're starting to feel symptomatic, but you don't necessarily need to go to a clinic or a hospital. And then the third thing we can do is make it much easier to test. Even though testing is widely available in the United States and most developed countries, parts of India have still had zero access to testing, and they're starting to limit testing in many parts of India to only symptomatic people, Joe, which we know from our experience a year ago does not catch the asymptomatic spreaders, which can be the biggest reason for the cases to rise.
Why is that happening with testing? Is it a resource issue right now?
Yeah, it's a combination of resources. Remember, these same tests are actually depending on some of these raw materials that the entire world is depending on to get their own COVID tests. So we're talking about things like plastic bags and tubules, ironically, that we need to get more supply for. And India also, ironically, Joe, is one of the largest exporter of drugs and vaccines. So this is a country that knows how to manufacture, but not when the entire world has a need. And we are seeing cases rise. It's not just India. We're seeing cases rise in countries that were doing well, like Japan. So this is becoming a more important issue for the U.S. to try to step in and help figure out how to get the message on basic measures and testing straight soon.
And Dr. Patel, I know this is personal. This crisis hits close to home for you. What are you hearing from your family in India, and what do they want us here in America to know?
You know, India is I'm proud to come from India. It's a very dignified country. I've never seen such pleas for help. They're begging for anything. And because I'm a doctor, what's happening every night is that a bunch of us U.S.-based physicians are getting on telephone calls with physicians based in India who are not used to taking care of COVID patients, Joe, because even despite being vaccinated, many of their workforce are still getting sick or positive. And so they are down so many people and trying to deal with a surge. We're just giving them basic help and advice, and they want to understand how to keep themselves safe. So they're looking for just basic facts and information, and we're trying to accommodate that. And luckily, many of them speak English, so it's easier to do that knowledge transfer. But again, when you're talking about the scale of the crisis, it has to happen 24/7. And that's another need. We can send personnel there in the form of workforce to help give extra hands on the ground.
Well, we're so glad you're there to help those doctors and to continue to help us understand what's happening. Dr. Patel, thank you so much. Appreciate your time this morning. Now to a tragedy off the coast of Southern California. A boat with dozens of people on board capsized and broke apart near San Diego. At least 4 people have died. NBC News national correspondent Miguel Almaguer joins us now with more. Miguel, good morning.
Joe, good morning. As you mentioned, at least 4 are dead, but 1 person remains in critical condition at a local hospital. Authorities say this is one of the worst tragedies they've seen in decades.
A life and death struggle playing out along San Diego's rocky shoreline Sunday morning. A boat carrying 30 people smashed to pieces as multiple agencies responded, plucking terrified survivors from the frigid, choppy waters.
Once we arrived on scene, the boat had been basically broken apart.
The 40-foot cabin cruiser said to be severely overcrowded. Many of the people on board able to walk and swim to safety.
This was a mass rescue operation that turned into a mass casualty incident.
Investigators say every indication points to a smuggling effort to illegally bring immigrants into the U.S. 1 person rescued along a cliff. Lifeguards rushing in, pulling 7 others struggling to escape the powerful rip currents. Multiple people requiring CPR. In all, 4 killed. More than 24 others transported to area hospitals. Conditions at the time, treacherous.
5 to 6 feet of surf, windy, cold. The water's around 60 degrees, so you get hypothermia pretty quickly.
People familiar with the area near Point Loma by the Cabrillo National Monument say this particular stretch of water can be perilous.
You can just get caught up on rocks and your boat can start breaking up, or rogue waves come and hit you from the side and start washing you inland.
With the ongoing surge at the southern border, smugglers often try to blend in with commercial traffic at sea. Customs and Border Protection says it saw a more than 90% increase in maritime apprehension last year compared with 2019, and they expect similar numbers for 2021. Back at Point Loma, debris is all that remains from the vessel in Sunday's incident.
Certainly in my 26 years and certainly in Lieutenant Romero's 28 years, this is probably the worst tragedy.
Authorities say the captain of the ship is now in custody and he is talking to federal agents. Joe, back to you.
And Miguel, what do we know about the conditions of the survivors and what happens to them next?
Well, we know their conditions do vary quite drastically. Some were suffering from hypothermia. They were able to actually walk back onto shore. Another, as we mentioned, is in critical condition. Investigators say they'll be questioned and then likely deported back overseas, Joe.
All right, Miguel Almaguer, thank you so much. Apple is heading to federal court today for a high-stakes trial. The tech giant will face off with Epic Games, the maker of the popular game Fortnite, over claims that Apple is running a monopoly in its App Store. NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos joins us now. So, Danny, first, a little background here. Epic Games sued Apple after the game maker offered customers a way to pay Epic directly, which meant Apple didn't get its 30% cut. So Apple booted Fortnite from the App Store, saying Epic wasn't following the rules. So with this case here, what is Epic's main argument?
Epic's main argument is that because so many people use iPhones, Apple, by having control over the iPhones and its App Store, in addition to those phones, has what is called a monopoly. They are engaged in unfair trade. They're engaged in unfair control of the marketplace, and they're charging exorbitant rates to people like Epic, who would have apps on the store and sell those apps. Apple's taking a vig of 30%, which they say is too much, and they don't have anywhere else to sell their products but Apple.
Everyone in the tech world is watching this because it could have wider implications. What does this mean for other app developers?
Here's the amazing thing. There's some amazing statistics here. Apple actually reduced its take from 30% to 15%, but only if you made up to $1 million from apps on the store. Now, that covered about 98% of the developers who had apps on the store, but it barely made a dent in Apple's bottom line because the top, say, 2% of developers account for the vast majority of Apple's products. So that 30% they're still charging to people who make over $1 million are still the bulk of the market. And so this has major implications, not for just all developers, but especially the developers at the very top of the pyramid.
And Danny, what about us? Depending on what happens with this lawsuit, what could it mean for Apple users and the future of the App Store?
Well, if you know a 12-year-old like I do, I know a couple of my nephews, they have already been devastated by the loss of Fortnite on the App Store. But, younger folks who are hooked on Fortnite or similar games, and Fortnite may already be fading in favor of some new game I've never heard of. But it's actual users that may not have access. Because if you look back at once Fortnite or Epic tried to do side buys on its app in-house, Apple kicked them off immediately within like hours. So this is a situation where people who use these apps should care, because it really depends on accessibility. Now, they're not making any money, the end users, one way or another, they're paying, but they want accessibility. They want to be able to access these products.
All right. I think it's not just 12-year-olds. I think there's some older folks who are deeply passionate about this too.
Oh, yeah. I know quite a few.
All right. Danny, thank you so much. Appreciate it. And let's get a check on your morning news now. Weather. Bill Cairns is with us on this Monday morning. Hey there, Bill.
Hey, good morning to you, Joe. Hope you had a wonderful weekend. So yesterday was a rough afternoon, evening, and dangerous in Mississippi. We had 23 tornadoes that were reported. A couple of them were big tornadoes, and it looks like at least most of them were in pretty rural areas. At 10 p.m. last night, East Coast time, so we're talking 9 o'clock, we had a tornado roll through Tupelo, Mississippi. That's where you're seeing some of these pictures from. We had a tornado emergency. We were afraid that we were going to see a big tornado going through a city. And we're still, waiting for the daybreak pictures, but the nighttime pictures that we saw show it was not a horrendous tornado. There's damage that was done, but no injuries, no fatalities. So here's how it played out on the map. And you can see the tornado started right around the Louisiana-Mississippi border, and then they just continued right through the center of the state and up there through Tupelo late last night. 23 in all. It only takes 12 tornadoes to be considered a tornado outbreak, so we easily met that criteria. So what are we looking at right now? There's no severe weather out there. We do have thunderstorms. If you're driving anywhere from Memphis to Nashville, there's a lot of storms and heavy rain in Tennessee this morning, light rain in the Ohio Valley, and we still have a couple thunderstorms left in Iowa and areas of Wisconsin. So we'll do the typical summer-like routine. We will see the heating of the day, and then we'll see thunderstorms this afternoon and this evening. We're expecting another severe weather outbreak. I'm not sure we're going to get a tornado outbreak, but we will see significant storms in areas, especially from Fort Smith to Little Rock up to Paducah, St. Louis, Indianapolis, Louisville, a large area there, and also a little section of the southeast towards Atlanta. So 40 million people today at risk of severe storms. And then tomorrow, we watch a large area of the southeast seeing a storm threat, including Mississippi once again, a lot of Alabama, so 31 million people at risk there. So today's forecast, you notice, look at Colorado, 48 only in Denver, chilly rain today. That's the exception. Most of the country is pretty warm, 75 in New York today, and there will be some very warm conditions tomorrow in the southeast before those thunderstorms arrive. So, Joe, May is our #1 month in the U.S. for tornadoes. We've had a pretty slow tornado season up to this point, one of the lowest counts that we've had in years. But yesterday was one of our more active days.
All right. Maybe it'll stay low, though, moving forward. All right, Bill, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Fingers crossed. Yep.
Coming up, taking a time out. Why Britain's biggest sports teams are boycotting social media. Next. A funeral will be held today in North Carolina for Andrew Brown Jr., the black man who was shot and killed by police nearly 2 weeks ago. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock joins us now from outside the church in Elizabeth City, where the funeral will take place. Sam, good morning.
Joe, good morning. Over the weekend, we saw hundreds of people protesting peacefully, calling, Joe, for the release of police body camera video that so far a judge has kept out of the public eye. In a matter of hours, a public remembrance behind me for Andrew Brown, as many questions remain about his death.
As the loved ones of Andrew Brown prepare for a final farewell, Andrew Brown. They're drawing strength from the power of peaceful protesters, taking to the streets to say enough is enough.
Across the globe, we're going to know. We're going to get justice for Andrew.
That's right. He didn't own any weapons. He was a gentle man.
Mourners arriving to Elizabeth City, North Carolina Sunday, where 2 public viewings were held for Brown, and calls for transparency found new urgency.
I feel like the tapes should have been released.
A judge allowed Brown's family to view about 20 seconds of police body camera footage last week and says they'll see more in the coming days.
No justice, no peace.
But the judge has refused to release the videos publicly. Brown was killed nearly 2 weeks ago when deputies tried to serve a drug-related search and arrest warrant.
Right here. See all the mud?
Brown's neighbor, Demetria Williams, says she saw the deputies open fire.
By the time I got here, they was literally standing in the back of his car, reeling it with bullets, assassinating this young man. He was trying to get away.
You saw him get gunned down?
Yes. Yes.
Did it seem to you like he was threatening the police?
No. Yeah, how you threaten the police when your hands is on the wheel?
Pasquotank County says deputies were threatened and their attorney defended the deadly use of force.
We believe that the shooting was justified.
4 of those deputies have already returned to work after the sheriff says they didn't discharge their weapons. The city of 17,000 that features a Confederate statue titled Our Heroes next to its courthouse, watching as the investigation and the soul searching simultaneously unfold.
We are tired, not just blacks, but whites, Hispanics, Asians, everybody, young and old. Older people are tired because enough is enough.
And guys, part of the judge's ruling last week on Wednesday was that the family needs to be able to see a longer portion of that body camera video involving 4 deputies, still redacted, but that has to be within 10 days. And the deadline for that would either be this Friday or Saturday. Joe and Savannah?
And Sam, looking ahead to the funeral, do we know who will be attending today?
We have a sense. Reverend Al Sharpton is going to be delivering the eulogy, and there will be family members, guys, of those who have also lost loved ones in police killings in solidarity. Examples of that, Eric Garner's family and George Floyd's family. Joe.
All right. Sam Brock, thank you so much. Some of Britain's biggest sports stars and teams have been boycotting social media. The 4-day blackout is a protest against online racism and bullying. Even Prince William has been taking part. NBC foreign correspondent Matt Bradley joins us now from London with more. So, Matt, this boycott ends today. Give us a sense of how big it has been, and for those involved, what do they hope to achieve?
Well, I mean, it's not just big in terms of, numbers of people who are involved. It's really the stature of the organizations that have decided to participate. They're all saying that they're in to kick it out. And that's the name of the organization that planned all this. Kick it out. Kick racism out of football. Of course, we call it soccer, but here they call it football. And it's not just football, actually. It's been joined by rugby and by cricket. That was just a couple of days before all of this started on Friday. So in a couple of hours, we're going to start to see I think around midnight tonight, that's when this is all going to end. So really by tomorrow morning is when we're going to start to hear discussion about what happened, whether or not this was effective. It's unclear. A lot of the organizers that I spoke with said that this really is a symbolic gesture. It's a boycott. It's meant to say that they want the big tech titans, the ones who have come under so much pressure in the States following all of these political episodes and questions of free speech. They want those big tech titans to do the same thing for sports that they've been doing for politics, getting rid of misinformation and digital abuse and really turning more scrutiny on this issue that's really affected a lot of players, not just in football or soccer, like I said, but across sports throughout the whole world. Guys?
Yeah, Matt, those big tech titans, what are Twitter and Facebook and other social media companies saying about this blackout, and are they likely to make any changes in response?
We haven't heard much from them in terms of direct responses, but, whether or not they're going to make any changes, the fact of the matter is, and I think even the organizers would admit this is really up to a lot of the participants. This isn't just putting it on the door of the tech titans, as I was saying. A lot of this is spreading the message to ordinary folks. I mean, it's the people in the stands, and of course, during the pandemic, that all went online, who have been the ones who have been committing this abuse. Now, in the past, the football clubs, the big names, UEFA, FIFA, they've all cracked down on the, if you will, in real life abuse that we've seen in the stands. And that's been generations in the making. We've seen, spectators making monkey noises, throwing bananas at players of color, one even unfurling a swastika in the stands. And again, this is all happening in real life. When it goes online, it makes it even harder to regulate. And that's why a lot of these organizers are saying, why not turn the same scrutiny that we have been using in the stadiums to the digital world? That's what they're hoping to get. Whether or not they get that, it's a really difficult, thorny question, and it really goes into a lot of the stuff about free speech that has been dominating the conversation in the States. Guys?
Matt, sticking with soccer, we can't let you go without talking about these pictures that we saw over the weekend at Manchester United Soccer Stadium. Images of fans storming the field. What's the story behind this? What can you tell us about it?
Yeah, and I mean, one of the games against Liverpool just got delayed. It's a complicated story, and it goes back a couple of weeks and has nothing to do with this boycott, actually. Really, what this is about is an effort by some of the biggest teams in international soccer who said that they were going to form what they called a super league. And what that is basically is bringing American-style sports and competition to global soccer, which had often been seen, long been seen, as a force for sort of democracy, meritocracy within global football. And now we're seeing that American team owners of Manchester United, like the Glazer family, they were the ones who, among other teams, decided that they were going to create this closed Super League. And this got the ire of the fans a couple of weeks ago. And that whole plan for the Super League was scrapped. But it seems as though that hasn't satisfied the players, the fans. They want to see the Glazer family go. They want to see American owners specifically, and there is a bit of xenophobia to this, guys. They want to see American owners either relinquish their claims on these big, bold-faced named teams, or they want to see them stop the spread of crass American-style capitalism. That's kind of what we're seeing here. That's kind of the expression onto European shores. They don't want European sports, global sports, to be run the same way American sports are. And that's why it's really manifesting itself in some violence, guys.
All right. Matt Bradley, thank you so much. The Biden administration recently unveiled what some might call an early Mother's Day gift. The president wants to give moms and all of America's caregivers a paid leave policy. NBC News political correspondent Ali Vitale joins us now with a look at what the president is proposing and how critical this help might be for some. Hey, Ali, good morning.
Hey, Joe, look, this might be a Mother's Day present if they can get it done. But the words that Joe Biden used when he addressed Congress last week were ones that advocates for paid leave have been wanting to hear for a long time. The question that they have now, though, is if Democrats on the Hill and in the White House can actually make it permanent now.
Dawn Huckelbridge's first year of motherhood nearly broke her.
I wasn't ready for what I faced.
She couldn't sleep or stop losing weight. But Dawn says she was lucky, able to take time with her newborn and time to heal.
I felt depleted in every way. But what I kept thinking is if it's this hard for me, how hard must it be for all of the women or the people who give birth in this country?
Chris Garcia was his father's caregiver. His employer wouldn't give him more than a few days to be with his ailing dad, 900 miles away.
My dad's having major surgery. He's having a quadruple bypass. I really should be here. And he's like, well, there's nobody to cover your shift.
A few days later, doctors called Chris at work. Chris was forced to give permission to remove his dad from life support by phone.
It took me almost 8 years to be able to deal with the guilt that I felt.
I wonder what having an actual paid leave policy would have done for your situation.
If I had had the policy in place at the time, it would have made a world of difference.
In a recent survey of 41 countries worldwide, only America lacks paid parental leave. Japan and Norway, for example, give new parents more than a year, paid, to be with their babies, while the U.S. gives 0. But a growing number of states, plus D.C. and Puerto Rico, have or will soon have some paid sick or parental leave policy. This year, when the pandemic laid bare the reality that illness can happen anytime, Congress passed emergency paid sick and childcare leave for some workers, but it was only temporary. Now, President Biden is pushing for something more permanent.
No one should have to choose between a job and a paycheck or taking care of themselves and their loved ones.
Biden's plan would guarantee workers 12 weeks of paid leave to care for newborns, aging loved ones, or even themselves after a serious illness. The plan would pay up to $4,000 a month and bolster the lowest paid workers. It's a lofty goal with a hefty price tag. $225 billion over 10 years, according to the White House, paid for by raising taxes on America's wealthiest. But to Dawn, who now works for Paid Leave for All and whose son is now 6, it's a check America can't afford not to pay.
What I think we should have learned over the past year is that at some point in our lives, every single one of us is going to need to give and receive care. We all are one diagnosis away from a crisis.
So, Ali, what are the chances of making paid leave permanent? What would it take to get this to pass in Congress?
Well, look, Joe, the pandemic has certainly elevated the care economy to the national consciousness in light of things like the she-cession and women falling back from the workforce in order to be better about taking care of their kids or taking care of things around home. People are very much aware that care is central to American life. The question, though, is if anything is going to be done on a permanent basis about this. The Biden administration does have the wind going in their favor in terms of the public polling on this. You look at it, and across party lines, things like paid leave are popular among Republicans and Democrats. But that's not necessarily going to be the case when you get to Capitol Hill, where this legislation is likely going to have to pass. It's not clear whether Democrats are going to try to go it alone and put this through some kind of reconciliation method, or if they're going to continue to find bipartisan consensus. But remember, this is part of the American Families Plan. That's the second thing that the Biden administration introduced, and that was just last week. First, they've got to get through this idea of the American Jobs Plan. That has more of the traditional infrastructure in it, and even that is going nowhere fast right now on Capitol Hill. Joe?
All right, Ali Vitale, thank you so much. It has been called the forever war, but now the U.S. is beginning its final withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan. That has left security experts and citizens alike worried about what's next for the war-torn country. NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel is in Afghanistan with more.
As of May 1st, the official withdrawal of U.S. forces has begun. All U.S. troops are supposed to be out of this country by September 11th. And here in Kabul, there are deep concerns that the pullout of U.S. troops could lead to civil war here or even the return of the Taliban, which would be disastrous for many Afghans, in particular women.
At the Ade school this morning in Kabul, the new Afghanistan is on full display. Girls and boys together in the same school. For the last 20 years under American protection, education has been transformed in this country, especially for girls. The Taliban banned education for girls and women. Now that American troops are leaving, the Taliban may return and put a stop to this in the name of Islam. In geography class, 17-year-old Najla Safi is one of the school's top students. She wants to be a gynecologist when she grows up and treat women and girls for free. Down in the library, she and others work on reading comprehension in English.
What do you think American troops leaving will mean for you?
If Americans goes, I think the fighting between Taliban and government is going to be happen because Taliban are people that don't understand about the future.
2 decades ago, the Taliban ruled Afghanistan. The Islamic fanatics and misogynists ordered women to stay home and cover up with burqas if they had to go out. Defiance was met with beatings or even death by stoning. Now U.S. troops are leaving, and the withdrawal could mean the days are numbered for the Afghan Music Institute. The Taliban banned nearly all music, especially for women. Girls could be whipped just for this. 16-year-old Mina Karimi is determined not to give in. She composed this work called Dawn, dedicated to the struggle of Afghan women.
I will never let anyone to stop me or other girls from playing music.
Here, they'll try to resist the darker days that are coming through will and music.
As the U.S. withdrawal gets underway, the Taliban have been making rapid advances. They already operate openly in much of the countryside.
Coming up, one TikTok creator is holding people accountable for spreading misinformation. That story up next. As TikTok explodes in popularity, it's becoming a place people turn to for important information, not just the latest dance craze. So when one TikToker saw medical misinformation being posted, information that was wrong and dangerous, she decided to fire back. NBC News Digital reporter Callan Rosenblatt joins us now. So, Callan, you spoke to a pharmacist who challenged dangerous misinformation about drugs. Tell us more about what she did and why this was so important to her.
So Savannah is a doctor of pharmacy, and she is also a lactation consultant. But she has used her platform in order to debunk dangerous misinformation on the app. Now, that does include drug information, which she has seen people making claims, for example, that cholesterol medications cause cancer. But she is actually using her platform more recently to call out COVID-19 misinformation. So this includes, at the height of COVID, a nurse who said that she did not wear masks outside of work. More recently, that has included TikTokers who are claiming to either make, sell, or steal fraudulent vaccine cards. And Savannah is not only calling these people out on her platform and using their videos to sort of call out what she would perceive as a bad actor, but she is also trying to hold them accountable by contacting their employers and making sure that their employer knows exactly what their employee is saying. This is how Savannah describes what she does.
I would take misinformation from healthcare workers that they post, problematic material online, and I would call them out for it. And not only would I call them out for it, but I would also, in a lot of the videos, post, why they're wrong and what science actually says about the topics that they're speaking on.
So that is what Savannah says. We are also seeing other TikTokers call out racism and sort of when there are call out accounts, they sort of have a lane. So this is what one TikToker said about calling out racism on the app.
I'm not the type of person that's able to stand out front of the lines and, the front lines of the movement and hold up those signs. But I am the type of person that I want to be a part of the movement. And so this is my way of doing it.
So as well as calling out racism and calling out medical misinformation, there is a lot of harassment that comes with doing this kind of work. So Savannah, for example, has received death threats. She's been doxxed. Her information has been posted to 4chan. And this is what she had to say about receiving harassment for doing call out work.
At the height of the harassment I was receiving, because it came in two waves, because right before I started calling out people for the fake vaccine cards, I posted a self-defense video about what I bring with me on a run in order for me to feel safe as a woman out by myself in public. And that incurred a lot of harassment from men who sent me, at the height of that, I was getting probably 30 to 50 DMs a day.
So that is what we're seeing in terms of harassment. Savannah has been inundated with hate mail, with doxing, and there's a lot of opinions on what she does. So for now, she's continued to do this work, but it is dangerous and it is difficult for her, especially as the mother of a young child.
All right. Callan, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Coming up, the U.S. faces a major shortage of affordable housing. Meet the builders who are 3D printing homes in half the time for half the cost. Next. Time for our CNBC Money Minute, the biggest financial headlines of the day and why they matter to you. Frank Holland is with us this morning. Hey there, Frank. Good morning.
Hey, good morning to you. We're going to start off with some Wall Street news. Americans, they own more stock than they ever have before. Data from JP Morgan Chase and the Federal Reserve show stock holdings among Americans rose 40 to 41% of their financial assets in April. That's the highest level on record. The enthusiasm comes as the S&P 500 index has hit 25 record highs this year, spurred by strong earnings and optimism over the economic recovery. Stimulus checks have also fueled a record increase in household incomes. Verizon is close to a sale of its media assets to private equity firm Apollo Global in a deal that sources say could be worth about $5 billion. Last week, the Wall Street Journal reported Verizon was exploring a sale of those assets, which include AOL and Yahoo. It's really struggled to grow those businesses, declaring them nearly worthless with a write-off back in 2018. Verizon sold Tumblr for an undisclosed amount back in 2019, and last year sold HuffPost to BuzzFeed. And Etsy is vowing to crack down on the sale of banned goods. Gizmodo reports the company will spend at least $40 million to improve its policy enforcement. That's in the wake of a Business Insider investigation that found about 800 listings violating rules. These included weapons, fake COVID-19 treatments, elephant ivory, and mass market items that were passed off as homemade. Etsy says it used a combination of automated, manual, and community reporting to catch violators. Joe, back over to you.
All right, Frank, thank you so much. A chronic shortage of homes is driving up prices across the country, and construction companies are struggling to meet demand. But the future of home building may be headed toward a 3D revolution, with startups using 3D printers to build houses in half the time for half the price of traditional construction. NBC's Kathy Park takes a closer look.
For decades, home builders have used hammers, nails, and concrete to put houses together. Printers were used for, well, printing. But now those two worlds are colliding. Home building has a whole new look thanks to a 3D printer, unlike anything you've seen before.
Just like you pick the house designs you want and you push print.
Companies like Icon are creating homes from the ground up with their massive printer and a special concrete formula.
For folks who may not understand the concept of 3D printing, what does it look like? What does it entail?
So 3D printing is taking a digital file of a house design and layer by layer depositing material to build up the house in 3 dimensions, one layer at a time.
Unlike traditional homes, which can take weeks or even months to frame, here the walls and foundation can be ready in less than 2 days with a 3 to 4 person crew, bringing down production costs to as little as $4,000 per home.
Aside from all the efficiencies of automating construction with regard to time and cost, concretes are an inherently resilient material.
This more cost-effective construction could help make homes nationwide more affordable in the face of a changing climate.
My hometown's been destroyed multiple times by hurricanes and tropical storms. I've spent Christmas in a FEMA trailer. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, because it takes a lot of money, a lot of time. It eviscerates a town over time to try to recover from disaster after disaster.
Icon built the nation's first community of 3D homes in Austin to uplift the chronically homeless. Tim Shea was the first person to move in.
I could never have imagined from where I came from that I would ever have this beautiful a place to live in. I'm so thankful.
And these homes are just starting to hit the mainstream market. In Long Island, SQ4D constructed the first 3D printed home for sale to the public.
We're trying to build houses in half the time for half the price. Our profits will be higher, and we will be able to show that with more projects that we do.
A 1,400 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bath home built in 2 days using 3D printing technology. Listed for just under $300,000, it's approximately half the cost of a comparable home in the same area. And offers came in by the thousands.
We've been looking since September of last year. It's just impossible to find anything at this price
and this quality.
How are 3D homes shaking up the housing market right now?
3D printed homes couldn't have come at a better time. We have a housing shortage and a labor shortage, and 3D printed homes really solve both those problems.
Homes of the future, now a reality as companies look to scale up with 3D.
Turning to politics, the Sunday morning shows often give us a lot of Monday morning moments. Yesterday's Meet the Press covered topics including the Biden administration's plan to expand government and the future of the GOP. Here's moderator Chuck Todd.
On this week's Meet the Press, pretty good lineup. I spoke with the Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen about President Biden's economic plans. As President Biden sells his infrastructure and jobs plan, I was also joined by Ohio Senator Rob Portman, a Republican, and Bernie Sanders, the progressive independent from Vermont. And here are some of the most important answers from Meet the Press Compressed.
We think the plans are extremely important and necessary to invest in our economy so that we can be competitive and have families and children succeed, invest in infrastructure, in R&D, and the things that shore up middle-class prosperity, education, child care, and health care.
All over this country, people said, look, there are massive problems exacerbated by the pandemic. And I think President Biden looked around and he said, you know what? We've got to address those problems, not worry about the rich and the powerful. So we are beginning to make some progress in dealing with issues that have been neglected for decades.
$6 trillion in new spending. Only about 20% of the jobs bill that the president has proposed goes to real infrastructure. And that part of it can be paid for. It's very possible, Chuck, that we can get a deal here if they're willing to do it. You know, we'll see. With COVID, you're right. A bunch of us went to the White House, made a proposal. And the president indicated he wanted to negotiate, but unfortunately the next morning they changed their mind. And Chuck Schumer announced that we were going to do this by reconciliation, which knocks Republicans out of the game altogether. So let's hope we don't have a repeat of that, because I think we can come up with a good bill that's bipartisan.
Well, I'm not going to speak for what the president will do in a negotiation, but he has made clear that he believes that permanent increases in spending should be paid for, and I agree. Over the long run, deficits need to be contained to keep our federal finances on a sustainable basis. So I believe that we should pay for these historic investments.
In terms of pay for, yeah, I do think we need progressive taxation, which says to the very rich, Biden says the cap should be, the floor should be $400,000. Nobody under that should pay more in taxes. But yes, the very rich and large corporations should stop paying their fair share of taxes to help us rebuild America and create the jobs that we need.
I'd love to talk about the higher taxes that Janet Yellen talked about, because they will not make our economy more competitive. It does just the opposite. I respect her, but she's just wrong on that. In fact, by raising the corporate taxes the way she wants to, you're going to hurt workers.
During President Biden's first 100 days, it's pretty clear the heart of the GOP is in the state houses. Here's what's happened in these first 100 days. Republican-controlled legislatures in 8 states so far have passed laws that are restricting voter access, including tighter limits on absentee ballots in some places. At the same time, similar bills have been introduced in 39 other states. We don't know the results of those yet. Then there's been some crackdown on protesters. 5 states already have passed bills that limit the rights of protesters. There's been a lot more looser gun laws. 19 states so far this year have passed new laws that loosen gun restrictions. And then finally, 7 states have passed laws that would prevent transgender youth from participating in student athletics. And we know that similar bills have been introduced in another 26 states. We don't know where that's going.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.